Hey, what's already? Welcome back to the channel. And this video wasn't exactly planned. There were actually a few other videos that I wanted to work on today, but I decided to go and hold off on those because some really interesting things have started to emerge online for the Nintendo Switch successor. And I mean, what kind of informant would I be if I didn't come out and give you all the latest and greatest information for the highly anticipated Nintendo Switch successor? You know, we've covered a lot of Switch 2 leaks up to this point, but these are by far some of the most interesting leaks that we've gotten up to this point because, according to the information that we're getting, and just because of where they're coming from, there might actually be some legitimacy to these. Now, as always, you know, with any kind of leak, I'll always encourage you to at least take them with some skepticism until we get an actual confirmation from Nintendo themselves. That's always the best practice to take. But, you know, that's part of the problem. Nintendo has kind of been dragging their feet for Switch 2 information. It's been a long generation, and fans are, you know, they're kind of craving information by this point. So with that in mind, lo and behold, we actually have two different leaks to talk about today. The first of which has already gone pretty viral by this point, but you know, as for the second one, I haven't really seen as many people talk about it, and in my opinion, it might actually be even more interesting because it reveals much more specific information about the successor, its launch, and maybe even a possible launch game. Now, I'll leave timestamps below if you want to skip around, but let's just go and get right into this first leak, and I think this one is likely to be very accurate. Over the past couple of weeks, accessory manufacturers have started to reveal what the Switch successor will look like. This all started off from a Chinese website, and it basically revealed that the Switch 2 will have an 8-inch display. A lot of people were kind of skeptical, though, just because this was from an unknown source. But then, Satisfy, a very well-known brand, put their Switch 2 grip up for pre-order. They even submitted a blurry image of the Switch successor that got a lot of people talking. But again, you know, it was just kind of assumed that this was a publicity stunt to garner attention to their brand. I mean, you know, that would be a brilliant way to get your name out in the wild, to put pre-orders up for one of the most anticipated consoles of all time before it's even announced. Seems like a pretty good way to get some attention. Well, about that, it's actually starting to look like both of those leaks were, in fact, legitimate after all, because now we have more brands posting their own accessories up, including Dbrand, out of all companies. I mean, again, this is a very well-known and a very well-respected brand. I mean, their marketing tends to be, you know, very tongue-in-cheek, but their products are high quality, and fans really enjoy them. So when they announced their pre-order page for the Switch 2 Kill Switch case, yeah, people started to freak out online, mainly because you can clearly see the Switch 2 inside its case. And while there's not really much new to note here, it basically looks identical to the current Switch, only bigger. But there are still some interesting things that you can take away from this, and one of the key differences is that you can see there is an extra button on the right Joy-Con. It's been revealed that it's a C button, which you can see here on a completely separate Switch 2 accessory leak. Like I said, the floodgates are starting to open up, and we're really seeing that from all these accessory manufacturers. I mean, the fact that multiple accessory makers have the exact same design tells me that they have its design ahead of the Switch 2 launch. That way they can prepare their accessories to coincide with the Switch 2 launch. In fact, Dbrand confirmed with a few different outlets that what they shared is the actual design and the actual dimensions for the Switch 2. They even revealed its exact measurements, which they claim is 270 millimeters wide, 116 millimeters tall, and 14 millimeters thick. Now, I understand numbers alone doesn't really mean a lot to most people. As people, we like visuals, and well, the good news here is that mockups are already available online, and you can see them here that the Switch 2 is quite a bit larger. Again, by all indication, it has an 8-inch display, which is larger than the majority of mainstream handhelds on the market right now. The only two mainline handhelds that we have that can compare is the PlayStation Portal, which also sports an 8-inch display, and then there's the Lenovo Legion Go, which is an 8.8-inch behemoth of a screen. Now, I know some people want a smaller screen for a handheld. Nintendo might do that a little bit later on down the generation like we saw with the Switch Lite, but I think for its launch, this is a good direction for Nintendo to take, mostly because the Switch 2 will have a lot more graphically demanding games that were more intended for a larger screen TV. That's one of the great things about the Portal compared to other streaming devices, because it does a good job at bringing some of those more graphically demanding games to a larger handheld device. So I think this is a good decision by Nintendo. However, this is definitely a bizarre situation for them. Nintendo tends to be a very secretive and protective company, to say the least. So I can definitely imagine that they're likely pretty upset about these accessory makers leaking information ahead of their actual reveal, and especially with Dbrand revealing very specific information. Just knowing Dbrand, though, I don't think that they care all that much. Again, they are a very tongue-in-cheek company. Now, as for this other leak, I'm a little surprised we're not seeing more people talk about this one. I guess maybe that's because it doesn't come from a well-known leaker. Again, definitely take this with a grain of salt. That's always the best practice to take. But what's really interesting is that a mod on Reddit received alleged evidence that this random leaker has proof of their claims. You can see here that this person said, "I've come from the future. I got my muggy hands on a final release, Switch 2, and its dock. Ask me anything. I'll post proof on Xmas." And then below that, you can see where a moderator said this leaker was able to confirm that they are, at least to some extent, telling the truth about having information that hasn't leaked yet, or they're just a really good hoaxer. So, I mean, this is definitely a strange situation. Definitely take it with a grain of salt. But this person was taking questions about the Switch 2, and they revealed a lot of supposed new information. Somebody summarized what they said, and you can see it here. It says, user claims to have held the console but not been allowed to turn it on. What he posted, the console is called Switch 2, and the logo is the Switch 2 logo with a giant 2 on the side. Their unit was dark gray, but apparently there is a full white SKU, both Joy-Cons and the tablet, and another special edition SKU is themed around a game with a 9. A very obvious hint at Mario Kart 9 possibly. Now, I'm going to go and point out here that there are rumors that Final Fantasy IX is in development, so I wouldn't necessarily rule that out either. But continuing on, they said the console doesn't really feel heavier than the current Switch. The buttons and sticks are marginally larger than the current Switch. Magnetically attaching the Joy-Cons to the console makes a mechanical click sound. The two back buttons are indeed the Joy-Con release buttons. Heard the reveal is next month for a Nintendo meeting. I think they may be referring to the investor meeting on February 4th, 2025, so that's pretty interesting there. Dock has the same ports of the Switch OLED dock and is a bit larger but curved, and so much of the screen pops out. The game card slot looks the same as the current Switch, which lines up with what we're seeing from the accessories as well. The top side of the Joy-Con, when detached, has a surprise feature. And the magnets themselves are buttons. It has an LCD screen, which lines up with what we've heard. I know some people want that OLED. I'm with you all on that, but I think just to keep the price down, that's why they're going to go with the LCD screen, at least early on. Maybe we'll see an OLED screen later down the line, which, is kind of a bittersweet thing. I'd like to see it at launch as well. Give us our own option, but Nintendo probably wants us to double dip. You know how this works. But then the ZR buttons are larger than the current Switch, and sticks are Hall effect, which thankfully, I guess Nintendo may have learned their lesson after the lawsuit against them for stick drift this generation. Now, this person also claimed that the dock supports up to 4K at 30 frames per second. I imagine in handheld mode, it's likely going to be 1080p. But, I mean, if all of this is true, that's a lot of new information, and just like the previous leak, there are already mock-ups online. You can see one of them here, and I mean, I think this looks pretty sweet. I know there's been conversations that it looks too similar to the current Switch, but I think in this mock-up at the very least, it looks noticeably different, and as long as the rumor is true that it will be named the Switch 2, I don't really think having a similar design is going to be a problem for them. Everybody wants to talk about the Wii U, but one of the reasons that the Wii U had a problem is because a lot of the Wii's audience was very casual, and they didn't even realize that the Wii U was a new console in the first place. They just simply thought it was an accessory and moved on. And I also believe that a lot of that Wii audience just moved on to phones, and they didn't even really care about consoles. Again, it was a very, very casual audience. Even still, though, I've always said that Sony has the best philosophy for naming their consoles to differentiate every generation, because it's very clear when something is new. They just simply number them PS1, PS2, PS3, and so on and so forth. And it seems like Nintendo will follow in that trend, which I think is a very, very good thing. It's something that consumers can easily understand. So I hope this is true. Now, I know a lot of people want it to be called the Super Switch, and while I think that's a cool name, and it pays homage to the NES, to the Super Nintendo, my vote still goes to the Switch 2. Yes, it might be a little bit more boring, but I think it's the best way that speaks to customers who aren't necessarily in the know like a lot of us are. You have to understand that a lot of us more hardcore gamers are constantly within the know. We read game news on an everyday basis, but when it comes to more casual people, when it comes to parents and things like that, they don't understand this quite the same way that we do. Even something like the Switch OLED, I can easily see a parent going into the store and thinking, hey, that's the next generation Switch, when in reality, it's not. So I think Switch 2 would be the best way to name it. Now, that's just my opinion, and definitely let me know in the comments below if you disagree with me, and if you do, give me your reason why. There you go, though. That's all the leaks that's currently going around, and this is pretty much to be expected for a new console launch. It's usually about this time before a imminent reveal that the floodgates start to open up. I mean, by this point, a reveal could be within the next 4 to 6 weeks. So, some information is bound to get out there ahead of time. But let me know what you all think about all this. Do you believe these leaks? And if you do, what do you think about the information that we currently have? Do you like how it sounds so far or not? Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode, but until next time, hit that subscribe button and peace out.